Right, guys, so welcome back. So previously we were looking at BMAT 2012 question 17 to do with this question about ADH. Remember, guys, the hormone ADH and its related organ, the kidney, are extremely topical questions they can ask for the homeostasis one. So it's really important that you're really understanding how this all works. But now, guys, we move on to BMAT 2011 question 1. So we have a table with the gland, its hormone, and some of its functions. It says which word or statement does not correctly fit into one of the gaps left in the table. So guys, pause the video, give yourself a minute, and be sure to come back where we'll be going through the answer. Okay, guys, so let's go through this. So let's actually fill in the table without us even looking at the options. So we have first we have the gland adrenal, and then we have the hormone adrenaline, right? So just extra information, right? So adrenal, so you can see that word renal, or sometimes this gland is called the suprarenal gland. Supra means like high or on top of. So the adrenal gland is a gland which sits on top of the kidney, right? So hence the term renal. And then specifically in the inner portion of the adrenal gland, you have adrenaline, which is secreted. And what's one of the functions of adrenaline? So that's basically essentially the flight or fight response, isn't it? So everything associated, for example, with when you have a sort of stressful situation, for example, when you see a bear. So what happens when you see a bear? Your heart rate would increase, you feel more agitated, you would start to sweat more, etc. Right, so that's that. And then the next one we have is estrogen, and one of its function is obviously female secondary sexual characteristics such as breast development, and that's obviously coming from the follicles, isn't it? So the egg follicles and the cells associated with that, and this is coming from the ovaries, right? Which is specifically present in females. And then the next one we've seen this plenty of times. So antidiuretic hormone. This comes from the posterior pituitary, right? And the function essentially is to increase water reabsorption. And then the next one is gland, testes, and then something. And this gives you male secondary sexual characteristics. And hopefully, guys, you should be aware that this would be testosterone, right? So testosterone. And if you like, male testosterone is like the female equivalent of estrogen. So estrogen gives female secondary characteristics, testosterone gives male secondary characteristics. And then the pancreas, and then you have which hormone, and then this regulates blood glucose levels. And this can basically be two things, isn't it? It can be insulin from the pancreatic beta cells of the islets of Langerhans, or it can be glucagon from the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans. So essentially, we're just looking for an option. We're just looking for one of the answers where none of the things we've mentioned is there. So insulin, that's there, so it can't be that. Increased heart rate, that's part of the fight or flight response, isn't it? Pituitary or posterior pituitary, that's for ADH. Testosterone is there. Estrogen is there. Regulate water level, or essentially what ADH does, isn't it? That's there. So therefore, guys, hopefully you can appreciate then that F in this case would be the correct answer. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Okay, guys, so welcome back. So previously we were looking at BMAT 2011 question 1. This question really to do with the topic of endocrinology and hormones and where they're from and their function. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense. But now, guys, we move on to BMAT 2011 question 25. This is a graph below shows how one factor in the internal environment in a person changes and returns to a normal level. So you have the normal level, it increases and it goes back down, and then it reaches back to normal level. It says if someone has a condition which makes their homeostatic system less responsive, how would the shape of the graph be altered? So guys, pause the video, give yourself a minute, and be sure to come back after that minute. We'll be going through the solution. Okay, guys, so this word again is really pivotal, homeostatic. So homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment, essentially negative feedback, which is essentially really nicely shown here. So it goes up and then it comes back down to the set level. So over here, the normal level, or you can even call this the set level, right, or the set point, right? So if your homeostasis isn't working correctly, what would happen? The first one, one would be earlier. So really, the homeostasis is really concerned with bringing it back down, isn't it? So it's not really going to affect area 1. It's mainly going to probably affect area 2 and 3. So it's not going to be associated with areas, because the whole point is that you have a change and then homeostasis fixes that change. So 1 is basically going to remain the same. And then let's actually skip to E and F. So it says 3 would be steeper. right? So if 3 is steeper, that means it would come back down more rapidly. That's obviously not going to be the case, because if your homeostasis is not working properly, it would probably actually look more like this, right? Probably look something more like that. It would take much longer for you to correct it. So it can't be that. And then it says 3 would be earlier. So that's basically saying it would start to decrease earlier, and that's obviously not the case, because if your homeostasis is not working, it's going to be harder for you to detect the change and therefore then to correct that change. So it can't be that. And then let's go through D. 2 would be higher. Yeah, this is probably a good option, isn't it? Because it would increase, it would increase, it would increase, it would increase, and it would increase. And then since this homeostatic system is less responsive, only until it increases significantly is it going to recognize that change and then start to decrease it, right? So then, yeah, D seems to be a good fit. But let's just exclude C. 2 would be earlier. So what that's suggesting is that the peak would be earlier, and therefore the fall in whatever this parameter is would be earlier. But that's obviously not the case, because the system is less responsive, and therefore, if anything, the peak would actually be later, right? So hopefully, guys, you can appreciate then that this one is going to be incorrect, and therefore, hopefully, you can see, guys, that D is the correct answer in this case. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, guys, so welcome back. So previously, we were looking at BMAT 2011 question 25, and hopefully this really brought home the idea of homeostasis, which is basically the topic of this series of videos, isn't it, guys? So now, guys, we move on to BMAT 2010 question 1. So it says, which row of the table correctly describes what happens when body temperature rises in a human? So this is really a thermoregulation topic. We'll explain how thermoregulation works, guys, but if you're feeling confident, give yourself a minute. Be back after that minute. We'll be going through the solution. So guys, let's go through this. So again, this is a homeostasis theory, isn't it? So the body temperature rises, and then you want to do negative feedback to make the body temperature come back down to the fixed 37 degrees, which is the optimal temperature for enzymes and other proteins, which are really important for the functioning of the body, isn't it? So the whole idea of homeostasis, guys, is the temperature goes up, then you need to detect that, and then when you detect that, you need to have an effector arm, or you need to do something to omit that change. And then that's going to bring the temperature back down to 37 degrees. So the thing that's going to detect the temperature, guys, in terms of temperature, is the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, guys, is essentially the home of homeostasis, if you like, right? The cerebral cortex, which is the other options. So the cerebral cortex is basically the most of the brain. So what you're probably used to seeing when you look at images of the brain is all of that is the cerebral cortex, and that's really important for the core function of the brain, is like emotion processing, thinking, sensation of pain, stuff like that, right? And then the next option is the arterials. Remember, arterials, guys, is basically the is the control point, right? So is the place where you regulate how much blood goes into the distal. So distal means after. So how much blood goes into the distal capillaries. I remember arterials. Remember the structure, guys. Um, they have a load of smooth muscle, right, and little elastin, and that really makes sure that they're really good at contracting and relaxing, and that really can change the diameter of the lumen, i.e. you can constrict the arterial, or you can dilate the arterial, and through that you can control the flux of blood to the distal capillary beds. So what's going to happen to the arterioles, guys, when it's hot? So what should happen to the arterioles is that they should dilate, and if the arterioles dilate, that means then the capillaries of the skin are going to receive more blood, and if the capillaries of the skin receive more blood, that means you essentially have more blood coming to the surface of your skin, and since the temperature in your blood is going to be proportional to your internal body temperature. If more blood is going to the surface of the skin, you can essentially diffuse more heat out of your body down essentially a temperature gradient, and that's going to act to cool down your blood and therefore cool down the rest of your body, isn't it? So yeah, so that's what you want to dilate them. And the next one, the hair erector muscles, right? So what these hair erector muscles are, so now at the time of recording, it's quite warm where I am, and looking at my skin, the hairs are really flat, right? Whereas if the hair erector muscles contract, such as when they contract in winter, what happens is they ping the hairs, so they really stand up, something like that. And essentially what this does is creates these pockets where air can be trapped, and obviously air is a poor conductor of heat, isn't it? So even if you have a load of blood coming to the surface, since you have air there, it can't conduct the heat from internally to the external environment, and that's going to really prevent you from losing heat, which is really important in the winter, obviously. But obviously, when it's hot, you want to relax these because you don't want this phenomena. Because you want good conduction between internal and external. So these are going to be relaxed, and therefore we're only left with one option. What's going to happen to the capillaries in the skin? The only thing that happens is that they're going to get more blood, but that's controlled by the arterioles. But in terms of moving, nothing, they actually don't move. They're just fixed in space. And really, remember, guys, this is all due to connective tissue, which really just holds capillaries and other vessels in place in tissue. So these do not move. Right. So hopefully, guys, you can understand then that the correct answer over here would be E. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hi, guys. So welcome back. So previously, we were looking at question 1 of BMAT 2010, talking about this topic of thermoregulation. So thermoregulation is really important, obviously, guys, for your bodily functions, and it's also an important topic in the BMAT. Although it doesn't come up much, I think it's still important. It's really important that you're familiar with how it works. But hopefully, that covers it all. So now, guys, we move on to BMAT 2010, question 5. This is the following statements are about hormone levels and their effects. This is which of the statements are true. So, guys, pause the video, give this question a shot, and be back after that minute where we'll be going through the solution. So guys, let's read this together. So it says increasing levels of insulin cause an increase in blood glucose level. That's obviously false, isn't it, guys? Because insulin acts when blood glucose levels are high, yes, but it acts to decrease the blood glucose levels, and that's obviously why you get a problem in diabetics when you don't have insulin. Their blood glucose levels are too high. So that one's wrong. There's increased level of estrogen, increase the thickness of the inner lining of the uterus. So guys, we haven't really covered this. This is to the topic of the menstrual cycle, but we can cover that now. So there's basically 3 important hormones you have to know about for this topic, guys, is FSH. So you have FSH, LH, and the last one, guys, you need to be aware of that you also have is estrogen. So estrogen, right? And most of these hormones do as they say on the tin. So FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. So your ovary is full of follicles, and in each follicle, at the center of each follicle, you have an egg, and each there'll be one egg which is released every month if you're a female, every 28, and this process takes 28 days. But every month, one of the eggs would be shed ready for fertilization. And what follicle stimulating hormone does, it gets ready that follicle for the shedding process, essentially. So that's what follicle stimulating hormone does. It says it understands, so it stimulates the follicle to be ready for the egg then to be shed. And then the luteinizing hormone, where the luteinizing part comes from, it'll make sense in a little while. But the purpose of luteinizing hormone is for the process of the egg to actually be released. So follicle stimulating hormone gets it ready, and then LH is like this trigger, the switch, which is going to make the egg be ovulated. And this happens midway through the menstrual cycle. So 28 days, midway will be 14 days. And then what estrogen does is that it prepares the lining of the uterus, right, by stimulating the division of those cells so that layer becomes thicker, and that really acts as a cushion. In case there's a fertilization of the egg, that acts as a cushion for the resulting embryo to then enter the uterus and essentially grow there, and then at the end, obviously, it's released from there, and you give birth to the baby. So the way these hormones are working, guys, we're going to go through that now. So if you imagine you have 2 axes, you have time here in days, right? And on the y-axis, you have the concentration of the hormone, right? So what's happening, guys, is that really early on, you have a follicle stimulating hormone, which is going to be high. That's going to really trigger the egg to get the egg and its associated follicle to get ready for this the shed of the egg and ovulation. So this is going to go up, and then it's going to go back down, and then actually and then let's say day 14 is the important one, because this is when the egg's released. So it's going to go down before the egg's been released, right? And then actually after the egg's released, there's also another little peak there as well. And what that little peak does, essentially, it gets the eggs for the next round after this ready for the same process, right? And then the next hormone is LH. So this is FSH. And then the next process is LH. I'm going to do that in dashes. So what happens to LH is that it's slow, but until you get to day 14, there's really a switch, and it goes insanely up, and then that acts as a trigger for the egg to actually be released. And then the last one is estrogen. So what happens with estrogen is that so after day 14, this is what's called the luteal phase, right? Hence why you get the name luteinizing hormone, LH. What happens with estrogen is that, I'm going to do this with crosses, it increases at the start, so pre-luteal phase, it increases, and that's going to act basically to prepare the lining of the uterus in case, essentially in case the egg has been fertilized. So, and then it's going to come back down, but then in humans, you have a secondary increase, so it increases again. right? So that's what's happening in humans. And then there's also another important hormone in the luteal phase that estrogen acts along with, and that's the hormone progesterone. So what progesterone is doing, I'm going to do this, let's say, with triangles. So progesterone is low until you get to the luteal phase where it really increases with the estrogen. So this is progesterone. And essentially what estrogen is doing is that it's making um, the inner lining of the uterus grow, as in by size, in terms of there's going to be more cells, right? But uh, what progest did I even write that right? So progester. Let me write that right. This is wrong. So it's going to be called progesterone. Right. So let's cross this one out. Right, so what progesterone is doing then so you have more cells from estrogen. What progesterone is doing is going to bring more blood vessels into that area, and is also going to encourage the formation of more glands. And what these are important, guys, to bring nutrients and gases for the baby in the early stages for it to grow when it implants into the uterus. But then obviously the after that, the placenta is going to form, and that's really going to be the main thing which is going to be driving the whole development of the baby. So hopefully, guys, that makes sense. So increased level used to increase the thickness of the inner lining of the uterus. That's true because it increased the cell density essentially. So that's true. And it says increasing levels of adrenaline increase the heart rate. So remember, adrenaline, guys, just link this with the fight or flight response, the sympathetic response. And fight or flight response, I like to think if I see a baby, what's going to happen? So the first thing that's probably going to happen is I'm going to be palpating, so I can really feel my heart racing. So this is also true. So hopefully, guys, you can then appreciate then that the answer would be C. So hopefully, guys, that was all of some help, and hopefully that was really clear, especially the explanation of the menstrual cycle. If you have any questions on that, guys, just be free to post some questions in the comments down below. But I really hope, guys, that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Okay, guys, so previously we were looking at BMAT 2010 question 5. The main take point message from here is how the menstrual cycle works. The menstrual cycle isn't terribly important for the BMAT. I think it's still important for you to have an idea of how these hormones are working. And hopefully that has given you a basic idea of how that works, guys. And you should be ready for any question which comes your way regarding that topic. But now, guys, we move on to the next question, BMAT 2010, question 13. It says signals are transmitted from one neuron to the next by molecules. These statements are about this process. It says which of the above statements are correct. So, guys, give yourself a minute, pause this video, and be sure to come after that minute where we'll be going through the solutions. Okay, guys, so let's go through this. So this really is talking about how a synapse works. So in a synapse, you basically have two neurons. So I'm going to draw two neurons like this, right? So you have the synapse is obviously the cleft in between the neuron, right? Then the neuron before the synapse is called the presynaptic neuron, and the neuron after is called the postsynaptic neuron. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward, guys. And essentially, what's happening? So remember, the whole point of a synapse, guys, is that the electrical language. So the language of the neuron, the way it carries information, is electrical, right? But then, obviously, to transmit information from neuron to the next, what you have to do is convert that message from electrical to chemical, and then back to electrical in the postsynaptic neuron. So what happens is that you have electrical impulses coming down, and these electrical impulses. This is even probably a bit too detailed, guys. You're going to learn more about this in your second year or A levels. But we can just give it a shot now. So electrical impulses run down the presynaptic neuron. This opens calcium channels, and then calcium rushes in, right? And then in the presynaptic neuron, so this bulgy part here, guys, is called the buton. So the presynaptic buton. There's a lot of these vesicle structures. I'm only going to do two here, and these have these dots in them, and these are the neurotransmitter molecules. So these are the chemicals, which is essentially the way the information is going to be converted from electrical to chemical, and the calcium forces these vesicles to exocytose, and therefore release these molecules into the synaptic cleft. And then obviously here you have a high concentration, and the low concentration that's going to diffuse across, and then it's going to find its receptor on the postsynaptic neuron. It's going to bind to its receptor. And then we're not going to worry too much about the details as we learn about that next year. But it binding to the postsynaptic receptor is going to cause the information to go from chemical and then back to electrical. So even that, guys, is probably a bit too much detail you need to know for the BMAT. You probably haven't even covered this detail in school yet. But hopefully, guys, that has made a bit of sense. So then let's go through the answers, guys. So transmitter molecules are formed in the receptors. No, they're actually formed in the presynaptic neuron, right? So this one can't be it. And then it says the signal is transmitted across the synapse by osmosis. Again, that's incorrect because it's not water, it's actual molecules which are diffusing. So this is going to be diffusion. This has to be wrong. Transmitter molecules are released once the signals has been transmitted across the synapse. And that also has to be correct, isn't it, guys? Because it's the fact that the transmitter molecules are released and then you transmit the signal across. It's not you transmit and then you release. So the order is wrong there. So then hopefully, guys, you can see all the answers have two options. So 4 and 5 have to be correct. But let's just make sure. So the release of transmitter molecules is triggered by an impulse. That's true. So the release of transmitter molecules is triggered by an electrical impulse, which causes calcium channels to open. And then that causes the release of the transmitter molecules. And number 5, the signal is transmitted across the synapse by diffusion. We already figured that one out. So hopefully, guys, then you can appreciate then here the answer would be F. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense. If you have any questions, just post down below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next clip. Okay, guys, so previously you looked at BMAT 2010 question 13, talking about how synapse really works. Hopefully, guys, that has made sense. Even this is probably a bit too much detail, but hopefully that level of detail, guys, just clears your brain about how this works, and you could answer any question that comes your way. But now, guys, we move on. We move on to BMAT 2010 question 25. This is the hormonal and nervous systems are often compared because of their similar roles in the body. Which of the following statements about the two systems is true? So guys, we've done something similar before. Pause the video, make sure you're back, and be sure to come back after that minute where we'll be going through the solution. Okay, guys, let's look at this question. This is number 1. The nervous system relies only on electrical impulses to work. So that actually it basically gives it away, is it? Because it sounds like a bold statement. So only, so it's actually also chemical, isn't it? Because the synapse, as you saw in the previous question, operates on a chemical basis. So this has to be wrong. It says both the hormonal and nervous systems activate target structures. Yeah, that's true. So for example, let's just say hormone system, for example. Let's take the example of adrenaline, which can be classed as a hormone, right? That activates the heart as its target structure. Whereas the nervous system, let's just think of a simple reflex arc. At the end of the arc, the motor neuron is going to stimulate the muscles. It's going to activate the muscle as the target structure. So this is true. And then the next one says the fastest responses in the body are produced by the nervous system. Yeah, this is true, guys. Remember, because with the nervous system, electrical impulses travel extremely rapidly, on the order of milliseconds. Whereas with the hormonal response, you have to release the hormone. It then has to travel in the blood. It has to go to its target organ, meet its receptor, and then do its thing, right? So this is true. And it says only the hormonal system relies on the activity of chemicals. We already just excluded that from 1, isn't it? So this has to be false. And again, guys, since this is also a key technique, guys, so since all of the options have 3 options, that means 5 has to be true, but we'll go through it anyway. Parts of the hormonal system may be controlled by the central nervous system. Yeah, so let's just say, for example, the hypothalamus, isn't it? So the hypothalamus is essentially part of the brain, is part of the central nervous system, and you can class that as like the heart of hormonal physiology, right? So hopefully, guys, you can it's quite clear then in this case the answer is going to be 2, 3, and 5, which then maps onto E. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense, and I really look forward, as always, to seeing you in the next video. All right, guys, so welcome back. So previously, we were looking at BMAT 2010, question 25, really comparing the hormonal system and nervous system. I think we've done this kind of idea before, but hopefully, guys, that was a quick revision, or if not, I hope you've learned something from it and you were able to take some good points away. But now, guys, we move on to BMAT 2009, question 13. This is which of the following movements will be severely and immediately disrupted if oxygen concentration in the blood becomes very low? So, guys, pause the video. Give yourself a minute, be back after that minute. We'll be going through the solution. Okay, guys, let's go through this. It says, what will be disrupted if oxygen concentration is really low? So why do you need oxygen, guys? You need oxygen for respiration, right? So if the oxygen is very low, you're not going to have enough respiration, particularly aerobic respiration, and therefore ATP is going to become low. So basically, any of these processes which involve ATP are going to be severely and immediately disrupted. So CO2 from blood into the alveoli, that's just mere diffusion, isn't it? So from a high concentration in the pulmonary capillaries to a lower concentration in the alveoli. So it can't be this one. Glucose from the lumen of the intestine into the villi. So I think we covered, guys, in a previous video how glucose is reabsorbed in the kidney through secondary active transport, and a similar thing happens in the intestine. So we can quickly actually recap that. So let's just say this is the so let's, for example, take this. So let's just say this is the lumen. So let's just say this is the lumen of the small intestine. Obviously, this is just bounded by tissue on either side. And remember, that square that I drawn, guys, that's just an example of an epithelial cell, because the lumen of the small intestine, if you follow it up or down, it's going to lead to the outside world, and that's bounded on this side by tissue. So epithelial cell is the difference between the internal and the outside world internal and the external wall, isn't it? So just to recap that, guys, remember what happens is you have primary active transport of the sodium pump going on here. So 3 sodiums out and 2 potassiums in, right? And what that's going to do, guys, is lower the sodium concentration inside the cell. Therefore, sodium would want to come in then. So sodium does come in, but it drags along with it glucose or amino acids, but the transporters are different. But this is just a general theme of what happens. And then glucose and or amino acids comes inside the cell, and then it has a channel on the other side, and then glucose and amino acids can then exit the cell. And in the tissue, there will be capillaries, and then glucose and amino acids can get into the capillaries, and that's basically how you absorb glucose and amino acids in the small intestine, but it will be reabsorbed in the reabsorbed is the vocabulary for the kidney, because that's essentially what you're doing, right? You try to get rid of it, but now you're reabsorbing it. Whereas here, you haven't really got rid of anything. It's the first time you're kind of taking it in, so you're absorbing it. But obviously, guys, so and this process over here requires ATP, and this is why this is a secondary active transport, guys. So glucose and amino acids are actually going from low concentration here to high concentration inside the cell. So they're actually going against the concentration gradient, but that part is not using the ATP, it's the part before that which is using ATP, creating a low sodium inside the cell, and then the sodium can then move. So this is the idea of secondary rather than primary active transport. Primary active transport is actually what's happening at the sodium pump, which is using ATP as it goes. So obviously, guys, if you don't have enough ATP here, that's going to be disrupted, and therefore you're not going to have low sodium inside the cell, and therefore sodium is not going to move inside, and therefore glucose and amino acids is not going to move inside, and therefore glucose and amino acids won't be reabsorbed from the lumen of the small intestine. So I think it's this one, guys. But let's exclude the other ones. So oxygen from the alveoli into the blood, that's just the same as A, but in the reverse direction, just simple diffusion. So it can't be this one. Urea from the blood plasma into the nephron. So yeah, urea from the blood plasma. Remember, we went through how the kidney works before, guys, in the previous video. You might want to look at that. I think it was the first part 1 of homeostasis. So what's happening there is you have urea in the blood plasma in the glomerular capillaries, and that's filtered by ultrafiltration, passing through the fenestrated capillaries of the glomerular capillaries, through the basement membrane, through the podocytes of the Bellman's capsule epithelium, and then in. So that's just passive in, that's just reinforced. You don't really require you don't really require ATP for that. Although actually, guys, if you're actually thinking a step ahead, it would be affected, but over the long term. But here it says immediately. The reason it will be affected over the long term, guys, is that over the long term, if you don't have obviously enough ATP and your heart muscle isn't respiring, then your heart wouldn't be pumping well. And if your heart's not pumping well, you're not going to have enough pressure in those arteries, right? Because that's what's giving the pressure in the arteries, the fact that blood's being forced into it from the heart. And if you don't have enough pressure in your arteries, therefore you're not going to be able to do ultrafiltration properly, as we explained in that video. So have a look at that one. So, but this wouldn't be immediate, so it can't be this one. And then it says water from blood plasma into muscle cells, right? So remember, guys, water just moves. So water would just move through osmosis, isn't it? And osmosis is a passive process. It's basically diffusion, but for water. So this wouldn't be affected in this case. So it can't be this one. And then the next one, water from the blood plasma into the nephron. That's just the same idea as the urea, isn't it? This is just ultrafiltration. This is a passive process. So it can't be that one. So hopefully, guys, you can appreciate then that in this case, the answer would be B. So hopefully, guys, I really hope that has cleared up any last bits of concerns, and I really hope that has made sense. And I look forward, guys, to see you, as always, in the next question. Okay, guys, so welcome back. So previously, we were looking at BMAT 2009, question 13, looking at this question about what would be affected if oxygen supply is limited. Hopefully, guys, you're able to work out that B was the correct answer. If not, hopefully my explanation helped a lot. But now, guys, we move on to the next question. BMAT 2009, question 21. This diagram shows a section through an alveolus. Gases diffuse through the alveolar and capillary walls. It says which row explains why gas exchange occurs in the alveoli. So, guys, pause the video, give yourself a minute, and be sure to be back after that minute. We'll be going through the solution. Okay, guys, so welcome back. So let's go through this. So we have a air-like sac. So you have a sac which basically filled with air, which is essentially what an alveolus is. And can you see these cells, guys? So do you remember what these cells were? So these cells, yes, that's correct, guys. So these cells are epithelial cells. I'm just going to write epi cells, right? And that's because that's the barrier between the internal and external environment. So obviously, this will be bounded by tissue. That's the internal environment, and external, because if you follow this alveoli outwards through the trachea, etc., you would lead to the outside world, right? So that's an epithelial cell. Remember, epithelial cells are to hold them in place. Underneath them, you have a basement membrane. So this actually, guys, would be a basement membrane. right? So you got a basement membrane here, and then the same thing. So with capillaries, guys, it's not really the difference between the internal and external environment, right? It's more about the difference between the inside of the circulatory system compared to the tissue, right? And in a way, these are like epithelial cells, although they're not exactly the same. So we call these endothelial cells. So endothelial cells, and I kind of think of it like the blood is inside. So endo, like endothermic, you're taking energy in. We're going to cover this in the chemistry topic, but endothermic, you're taking energy. So it's something to do with the inside. So hopefully that makes sense, guys. Why in the capillary we call it an endothelium. And again, endothelium, guys, as with everything, is also bounded by a basement membrane. So something like that. And essentially, this cool thing about this alveoli, guys, is that the basement membrane for the endothelium and the epithelium, they're connected. So as you can see over here, they're connected. And the reason why that's important is to minimize the diffusion distance. Remember, the diffusion distance is inversely proportional to the rate of diffusion by a fixed law of diffusion. So you want to have a short diffusion distance to maximize your diffusion of gases, which is happening between the alveoli and the pulmonary capillaries. So it's a good idea to have a thin basement membrane, and B, to just fuse the basement membranes together, because then you only have 1, 2, 3 barriers to get through, right, to move gases to and from the pulmonary capillaries. So the concentration of, what would be the concentration of oxygen in the alveolus? So we'd expect that to be high, isn't it? Right? We'd expect that to be high because we want oxygen to move from the alveolus into the blood. So it must be high there and low there. So oxygen would be high there, and then oxygen in the high, and these options as well. And then the oxygen in the capillary should be low. So it should be one of these options, that one or that one. And then it's carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide, you want it to go in the opposite direction. So you want it to be high here and low here. So therefore it's going in that direction. So CO2 in the alveolus would be then low. So yeah, so basically just left with this option here. And then the carbon dioxide in the capillary should be high. So hopefully, guys, yeah, hopefully you can understand why D is the correct answer in this case. So hopefully, guys, that was pretty straightforward. And yeah, we really look forward to seeing you in the next question. All right, guys, so welcome back. So previously, we were looking at this question, question 21 of BMAT 2009, really looking at the structure. I think I went in a bit more detail about the structure of the alveoli, but I think that information should be good in case something like that does come up. And we also went through the question itself and how D was the correct answer. So hopefully that made sense, guys. But now we move on to BMAT 2009, question 25. So it says here, guys, the following 5 statements relate to homeostasis, the maintenance of a stable internal environment of the body, as we've already been saying a lot through these videos. And it says, which of the statements are correct? So guys, pause the video, give yourself a minute. Be sure to come back after the minute, and we will be going through the solution. Okay, guys, so let's look at this. So it says, number 1, it says insulin helps to control the water content of the body. That's actually wrong, isn't it? It's ADH, the important hormone that always comes up. So this one's not true. And then the next one, it says homeostasis depends only on hormones. That's actually false. So remember, we went through an example, guys. If you touch a hot saucepan, if you leave it there, then you're going to damage your tissues, right? Because you have a high temperature. You want to keep a constant temperature on your hand, and therefore that doesn't involve the hormones. That actually involves neurons and neurotransmitters and the reflex arcs, isn't it? So that's an example of homeostasis, but depending on the nervous system, right? So this is false. And then, guys, also, can you see again, all the options have 3, all the options have 3 of them have to be correct. So F is definitely going to be the correct answer, but let's just go through it anyway, the other options. Pancreas helps to control the glucose content of the blood. Yes, that's the endocrine function of the pancreas through beta cells of the islets, which is insulin, and alpha cells of the islets, which is glucagon. So insulin brings glucose down. Glucagon, when glucose is gone, brings glucose back up. So this is true. And remember, the other function of the pancreas is the exocrine function, so releasing all the enzymes into the small intestine, digesting lipids through lipases, proteins through proteases, trypsins, that sort of thing, and carbohydrates through amylases. And then it says both the nervous and hormonal systems are involved in homeostasis. Yes, we just described that, and that's the counter to number 2. So this is true. And it says the skin is used to help control the body temperature. Yeah, we just saw a question in it through the hair erector system, and also through the blood supply to the surface of the skin. So this is also true. So hopefully, guys, that made sense, that why F was the correct answer. And really, guys, if you're certain that the first 2 options are incorrect, rather than even wasting your time, you can just say F straight away, and that's really going to grab you a few seconds. For the harder questions in BMAT section, especially the math section, that's just a heads up, which we're going to be covering pretty soon, guys, actually. So I think that's actually the last question of the homeostasis section. I hope all of this was good, guys, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. But next, guys, we'll move on to a different topic, and we really look forward to seeing you in that one. So see you soon, guys.